What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Evan Olbricht and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 essential tips for beginners in sports photography. So this is just what I've learned in my experience as a sports photographer working for my college for around 3 years now. Started there freshman year and I'm going into my senior year now, so super excited about that and I've learned so much useful information in that. So I thought I'd kind of put the main tips together and make a video on it, and I think this is going to be super helpful if you're either just starting out in sports photography or you're kind of just have been doing it for a little bit and trying to get better, or even if you're a good sports photographer and just want to kind of nail in some of those specific things that you're working on. So first off, I want to talk about composition and framing. So this is super important and kind of, I guess I'd say for me, the most important one. Composition and framing is super important for normal shots and then also creative shots. So I'll put a couple photos up right here, probably just one of a normal photo of composition, and then I'll put another one. I think I just did a golf one that I really liked the composition. It was super kind of a fun framing, so I'll put that one up right here as well. And then these shots both have totally different looks to it, and there's where the athlete is centered in the photo, you can see everything behind it, he's framed nicely, you're kind of using the rule of thirds. And then there's also the other one where it's kind of more of a creative framing and you're kind of testing new things with your camera, with your lenses, and with your photography. And those can come out super cool as well and really stand out compared to other ones, because most photos that you see are basically just standard. They're framed in the center, and that's super important and super hard to get sometimes too if you're in sports, and that takes a lot of practice. But for framing, I like to shoot pretty tight as well, and this helps to get their emotions, helps keep it nice and tight too, so you're focused on that one person, even if there are other people around, because if it's like a landscape photo and there's like a football field and there's a ton of guys on it, you don't even know who the subject is. So you want to make sure the subject is clear in there, and then you want to make sure you can see his emotions and it's nice and close to his face. And then usually, just like I have right now, it's focused on my eye. So usually you want it focused on their head as well. And that's super important for their emotions, just for the framing of the photo, and the focus of it is super important. So composition and framing is a lot of fun, and you could also mess around with it a lot. So for me, I would just say kind of looking at inspiration from other photographers, seeing what they're doing, seeing what maybe they're posting, or even companies like, oh, if I want to photograph football, I'm a Rams fan, I would look at the Rams Instagram, say, hey, this is what they're posting, this is the kind of framing that I want to get in my football photos and stuff like that. So use that to pull creatively, and then also kind of have fun with it, try new things. Yeah, for me, I would say I've pulled a lot of creation as well from looking at YouTube videos and kind of looking at what they're doing creatively and kind of just things that I can try, and then I can put my own little like twist to, and that's been a lot of fun as well. So yeah, definitely work on that, and that's why I have it first, because I think that it's one of the most important things for sports photography. Second thing is post-processing basics. So I did not do really real editing until a couple years ago when I got my job as a college sports photographer. But before that, I probably spent like 3 or 4 years kind of doing like Instagram editing and just like normal random stuff on the phone using like the Apple editing, and it was just really bad. So actually getting Lightroom, Photoshop, all of that, and learning how to edit is the key to having good photography. Because I've had some photos that I was like, oh, that's a good photo, and then I look at it back and it's, first off, I didn't shoot in RAW, so that didn't help. So I don't have the RAW photos, and then I edited them in Instagram, and then I only have those photos that were edited on Instagram, and they're horrible. Like the lighting is bad, the colors just look from another planet, and it's just not a good edit. So being able to actually learn how to edit using Adobe and using everything that the professionals use is so important. And really, like, I have a student discount one right now, and it's just for Lightroom and Photoshop, and it's like $10 a month or something. So having stuff like that isn't that expensive, and if you want the whole set, it's definitely more expensive, but there are ways to get it cheap if you just want Lightroom, just want Photoshop, and stuff like that. You can definitely get it done and just edit as much as possible. For all my photos, I go through Lightroom usually, and Photoshop, and then depending on which ones, I edit as many as possible just to even get the editing down, to learn presets, to get better with my presets, and to just make more presets to make my editing faster in the future, and also just get better at editing overall. And yeah, super important, and I would definitely say do that as soon as possible, because I waited way too long to do that. All right, so the third thing we're gonna talk about is understanding lighting. So this is super important, and I guess this is also one of the most important things, which is why it's on this list, but just understanding where you're shooting, the setting that you're shooting at, and the equipment that you're shooting. And this is super important, and the settings that you're shooting at, the ISO, so it's not too grainy. I started shooting in a gym, and it's a D2 college, so the lighting just wasn't the best, and it's actually gotten a little bit better, surprisingly, and it's still not good. But when I started shooting, I had my 1 to 400 f like 5.6 to 6 point something, and it was just so dark in the gym. Had my ISO cranked, and it was just so grainy. Like none of those photos I even have in my portfolio or anything now, just because they were so grainy. It was just crazy. Like I didn't even like looking at the photos. So I actually started shooting an 50 mil f1.8, which is pretty funny because it's like a nifty 50, and it's used for like portraits and stuff, but that was like kind of my budget lens for indoors because it was the f1.8. So being able to use that really helped elevate my photos. Now I've 24 to 70, 2.8, which is still a little bit dark. So still, I sometimes use the f50, f1.8, just because it helps so much with the low light settings, and I don't have to crank my ISO that high. So being able to understand that and just having experience with lighting, shooting at night, maybe sometimes I'll shoot baseball games and it's getting darker around sunset and I'll have to switch to my 70 to 200 because the aperture is lower than my 1 to 400. So just even those little differences, or like when to switch, will really help with the grainy photos, help the image quality overall, and you're just gonna be so much happier with your photos. And the fourth thing I want to talk about is understanding your camera equipment. So obviously this is super important. I just got the R5 2 years ago, and I'm still understanding it, to be honest. I've even like watched a couple videos recently on the video settings just because I started doing that more, and I feel like my videos have gotten so much better because I've been able to understand the settings. But for photography, literally just going in manual, understanding the settings, watch videos, do it yourself. So important. See what other photographers are doing that you like their style, and just being able to recreate some of those will really help you with your settings, and to lock in those settings that you use all the time and the other ones that are kind of more for creative fun or for maybe video versus photo work, and be able to understand that difference and to get those settings right is just crucial to having good photography, because settings is so important for sports photography. I'm actually gonna be making a whole YouTube video on this topic next week. So if you definitely are really interested in this, then make sure to watch that. But basically just dialing in your settings from your high shutter speed, maybe like 1/1000 is super important. You don't want it really under that. You might get a little bit blur in that. You don't really want motion blur unless you're trying to do that, which then you can go for some creative stuff and then have more motion blur. And then there's also usually want your f-stop, maybe like f2.8 to 5.6, or maybe even up to f8. There's definitely different, depending on the lighting, depending on what you're trying to get. There's so many different settings you can use, but I'm gonna have a little cheat sheet in the next video, so make sure to stay and watch that next week. But yeah, settings is super important, and just being able to understand what works for you, what works in the setting that you're in, maybe that different lighting, and then obviously different sports as well. You're gonna be using different settings as well, probably. So yeah, there's definitely a ton of stuff for that. Even for the R5, there's definitely a lot of autofocus settings now. So even messing around with that is super important, and that's helped my photography a lot too. And my fifth one is shoot as much as possible. And I know I've said this so much in all my videos, from like sports photography, surf photography, all of that. Every one I say, shoot as much as possible, because that is what has helped me so much. It helps you, first off, get to know your camera, get to know the settings. You just get better at the framing, the composition. You get better at editing because you have more photos. You get better at understanding the lighting. You get better, like literally everything that is important in photography just by shooting as much as possible. And then also you're gonna have more photos to build a portfolio. You're gonna be talking to more people, build your network up. So just shooting as much as possible is crucial to becoming a good photographer, to building your network, and overall building a business. And for me, I had a couple years where I wasn't shooting that much in high school because I was playing a lot of sports. And then in college, I wasn't playing any sports, so I started shooting a ton. And you can see my portfolio, all of my photos from now are in college, because your best photos are the ones that you haven't taken yet and the ones that you're going to take, because they just get so much better. And I was like, in high school, I have some photos where I'm like, man, that's like the best photo I've taken. And then like a couple months later, I'm like, oh, these photos are the best photos I've taken. And then next couple months, these photos are the best. And they just keep getting better. And that's just because I'm learning so much. and I'm gaining experience, you're meeting new people. So I think it's so important, and definitely the most important thing is shoot as much as possible if you're trying to be a better photographer, and really anything in sports photography and portraits, surf photography, really anything. Shoot as much as possible and it will help you so much. Yeah, and you're gonna see so much growth in that in the future. Thanks for watching. That's all I have for you. Yeah, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Hit the thumbs up, really helps me out, and share this video to your friends. Thanks for watching. See you next video.